Welcome to the flight levels. On August 6, 1997, Korean Air Flight 801, a Boeing 747-300, crashed into high terrain approximately 3 miles southwest of Guam International Airport while on approach to runway 6 left. 23 passengers and 3 flight attendants survived with serious injuries. 228 passengers and crew were killed. This is part 1 of a 2-part series. Today, we're going to walk through the final minutes of the flight from the pilot's point of view. What they briefed, what they saw, what they believed, and what the airplane was doing as it descended towards Guam. Let's get to it. In the cockpit were a captain, first officer, and a flight engineer. On this flight, the captain was the pilot flying. About 30 minutes prior to landing, the captain briefed the approach. Reported visibility at Guam was 6 miles, and the crew anticipated flying the ILS to runway 6 left. However, the glide slope for the approach was noted out of service, so the captain briefed a minimum descent altitude of 560 feet. During the descent, the controller advised ATIS uniform, which the first officer acknowledged. The first officer then requested deviations around weather, which were approved. As Flight 801 neared Guam, the controller instructed, "Turn left heading 090, join the localizer." Shortly after, the controller cleared the flight for the approach. Korean 801 cleared ILS runway 6 left approach, glide slope unusable. The first officer replied, "Korean 801 roger, cleared ILS runway 6 left." There was no verbal acknowledgement of the glide slope being unusable. Just inside the initial approach fix, the cockpit voice recorder captured the flight engineer asking, "Is the glide slope working? Glide slope? Yeah?" The captain responded, yes, it's working." A short discussion followed, adding uncertainty as to whether the crew believed they were flying a non-precision approach or were informally referencing glide slope indications. As the aircraft descended through approximately 2,300 feet, the captain stated, "Since today's glide slope condition is not good, we need to maintain 1440. Please set it." Approaching the final approach fix, the captain then said, "Look carefully, set 560 feet. The first officer replied, "Set." At this point, the airplane had not even reached the final approach fix, Gookie. As the aircraft descended through 1,400 feet, the ground proximity warning system announced, 1,000. The crew continued routine callouts for landing gear and flaps. The captain then asked, "Isn't glide slope working?" No one responded. The captain next called for the windshield wipers to be turned on. They would remain on for the rest of the flight. Moments later, the ground proximity warning system announced 500. In response, the flight engineer reacted with a brief, confused, "Eh?" The system then enunciated minimums, sink rate. Flight data showed the aircraft descending at approximately 1,400 feet per minute. Descending through approximately 730 feet, the flight engineer called 200. The first officer replied, "Let's make a missed approach." The flight engineer said, "Not in sight." First officer repeated, "Not in sight, missed approach." 4 seconds later, the captain finally commanded, "Go around." Control column input increased at roughly 1 degree per second. The nose rose about 3 degrees up. At nearly the same moment, the ground proximity warning system announced 100, 50, 40, 30, 20. 2 seconds later, the aircraft struck terrain at approximately 660 feet above sea level, about 3 miles from the runway threshold. In the final minutes of Korean Air Flight 801, nothing dramatic happened in the cockpit. There was no mechanical failure, no sudden loss of control, no weather emergency. The airplane descended smoothly under autopilot toward what the crew believed was a stabilized approach. But the aircraft was descending below the minimum altitudes that would have protected it from rising terrain, and no one in the cockpit stopped it. The captain believed he understood where the airplane was. The first officer and flight engineer did not intervene, and the warning systems activated only after the situation had already become unrecoverable. This was not a single mistake. It was a sequence of assumptions, misunderstandings, and missed cues, each one survivable on its own. In part 2, we'll step back from the cockpit and examine why this accident unfolded the way it did. The training environment, the authority gradient, the role of air traffic control, and the automation that failed to break the chain before it reached the ground. Because Korean Air Flight 801 was not just a tragedy of pilot error, it was a failure of the system meant to protect it. If you're interested in practicing IFR communication and clearances outside the airplane, I've built a tool called the ATC Clearance Trainer. It's designed to let you practice real-world IFR clearances at your own pace. I'll leave a link in the description. As always, thanks for watching. If you found this useful, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next week for part 2. Remember, don't just fly, climb to the flight levels. On its own. Excuse you. 3 miles southwest of Guam International Airport. Nope. The flight officer. Nope. The flight officer. Who's the flight officer?